I'm just gonna do this all in one take because yeah, like this is just literally me talking anyway. I was talking to my friend today, and he was telling me about how he's avoiding talking to girls right now because he thinks that like the he thinks the downsides are too detrimental compared to the upsides. Basically, in his words, he said, "Oh, this it's literally only good or bad. There's no in between that. You either are gonna be happy for the rest of your life, or it just ends up bad. That's the only two options you can get." And that kind of got me thinking a little bit, and because obviously he was talking about romantic love, and it got me thinking about like the correlation between grief and love. And even though obviously there is a correlation between grief and love, I started thinking a bit more about it, like what it like actually means, like what actually is love. When you talk about love as like a feeling, how would you describe it? If I asked you right now, explain love, how would you actually be able to word it? Because everyone has a different way of explaining how love works for them. The dictionary definition is that it's a complex range of strong, positive, emotional and mental states. Yeah, but so is like any emotion that makes you feel happy. So I can't really say that is a good description of what love is, even like because it's too broad. Even though it's right, it is fully right, but I don't think it's a good description of what it actually means. In psychology, it's love is described by three different factors. It's intimacy, passion, and commitment. Well, that's true, but I feel like that still only applies for romantic love. I don't think it takes love into all aspects. Biologically, love is just a release of chemicals in your brain. That's it. Just a release of chemicals like dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin, and that's it. Which maybe biologically speaking is true, but I don't think when you're experiencing how love actually feels. And I just want to make this clear for the entire like yap session that I'm not, when I talk about love in this, I'm not talking about like romantic love. Like, I am talking about romantic love in as one of the many aspects of love. I'm talking about love in its whole. I'm talking about like all aspects of love, every single part of it. But yeah, when I say that, I don't think that love is something you can really just fully mesh out with words, to fully explain through words. I think a lot of what love is just a feeling or like an action, and everyone knows what it is even if they can't describe it. So does that mean like in the same sense grief has like that same like psychological biological component or whatever? The dictionary definition for love is that it's the natural multi-dimensional response to a significant loss. So does that mean that the only times you can actually ever feel grief is when you lose something? And in a sense, even if people think that you can just feel grief over anything, I think you can only truly feel proper grief when you do lose something. I think the definition there is pretty spot on. I think you can only really feel grief when you do lose something, yeah. And once again, obviously there's a romantic aspect of it. There's the aspect where it's like you got dumped by your ex and you love them, and you're grieving now, which is, there's obviously that aspect. But this can also go for other aspects. Somebody who's really really into a sport and they get an injury and they can't play that sport again. There's another example of grief, and that's a grief that you can feel. That's like just as much as that romantic grief. Platonic grief, where your best friend is no longer your best friend and you lose them. You lose that sense of having somebody that close to you. Another aspect of grief. Yeah, obviously loss of pets, loss of parents. But yeah, everything that relates to grief, I think, is just like a form of losing something that you did once love in some form. So, is there just a way where you can stop feeling like? Because everyone knows grief is so shit. It's not the worst, obviously, but It is a really, really annoying, bad feeling. It's just crap. It's full crap. And a lot of different religions have like an example. Like obviously different philosophies have their own thing. Nihilism has a thing where nothing matters since you're gonna die anyway. Stoicism has the thing where if you do feel grief, it shouldn't matter to you. Like you should be able to move on from it. And yeah, there's obviously how you can cope. That's all methods of how you cope with grief. I'm talking about, is there a way where you can just stop feeling grief, full stop? And even if a lot of philosophies that I know of, obviously I'm not very educated on that, I'm just saying off the top of my head, but all the philosophies I know, they mostly just tell you how to deal with it. A lot of religions do tell you how to stop feeling it though. There's Buddhism, which it talks about worldly desires and how you need to let go of like worldly attachments so you don't feel grief while losing them. In Christianity, it's a bit more fleshed out. Well, Buddhism is very straightforward because a lot of the religion does rely on that. In Christianity, it's you should be seeing all of it as temporary, since your time on earth is also only temporary in their belief. Taoism, for example, Taoism says that grief is just, you need to understand that grief is just part of the natural chain of life, and that it's something that you will have to experience no matter what. And in Islam, it says that like see the cause of that grief that you're feeling as something that was never yours, like something that was actually never yours to begin with, but rather something that was entrusted to you by God. So by losing it, you actually haven't lost anything since it was never yours to begin with. And all of these, to some aspect, are probably really helpful for people to stop feeling grief. Maybe not stop, maybe to mitigate grief. Because personally, I think it's impossible to never feel grief again. I think there's no way in life where if you sit down now and make one change to your life or a few changes to your life, you're gonna stop feeling grief. I do think there's ways to mitigate it. There's like different ways to lessen the effects on it, but I think it's impossible to stop feeling it overall. Because in a way, I think grief is love, where it's not like, obviously it's not the same thing as love, but I think grief is love in the way where grief is just the absence of love. Where, let's think about like a scale. If the scale goes from like grief to love here, and you feel like grief here, that means one time you did feel something here, and the only reason why you're feeling it like here now is because you once felt it there. But yeah, it's a really shitty way to explain it with the number line, but that's kind of like what I'm saying, where it's like a negative to a positive, you know? And by losing the positive, you go into the negative. Anyways, yeah, going on from that, Buddhism, obviously, it explains this in the most straightforward way, where stop loving things altogether, and you won't feel so much grief by losing it. Obviously, I'm simplifying it, it's not that simple, but that's basically the core aspect of it. But yeah, once again, as humans, I think it is impossible, fully impossible for humans to stop loving. And this is in all aspects. You can't just quit doing everything that you love since you're scared that, one day it might bring grief. One day what you have won't be with you anymore. And that is the reason why you don't want to flesh into it to begin with. So I think accept the possibility of grief, even if it is gonna suck, because you can't live your life in fear.